from working out naked and selling sweat to having pedophilic relationships. The ancient Greeks had a huge impact on the world as we know it. They made huge strides in diplomacy and war, which gave them the chance to create technology and culture that led to unimaginable progress at the time. But even though they made important gifts to the world, their culture and traditions included some things that most people in modern societies would find hard to understand. There are many strange things about the ancient Greeks that are not as well known as the parts of their society that are still used today. These include their strange festivals and traditions, their controversial sexual practices, and their horrifying torture devices. Severe punishments for infidelity. The ancient Greeks thought that adultery was much worse than rape. They thought that rape was a normal form of violence that was a part of life. For them, it didn't mean violence against a person without their permission, but violence against the person's guardian, whose property had been destroyed and made bad. So the victim's guardians took up the violence charge, and if the offender was found guilty, he or she would usually have to pay a fine. On the other hand, the Greek word for adultery was moikeia, which meant the seduction of a free woman under the protection of a kyrios, lord or teacher. The ancient Greeks thought that this action had a direct effect on the family, which was the most important thing in their society. If the adulterer was found in the act, the protector could kill him on the spot. If the case went to court, the person who cheated on their partner would have a big radish stuck in their anus. On top of this, hot ash was used to remove the accused's crotch hair. As a way to shame the adulterer, each of these measures was meant to make the person look like a woman. Monetary payment for an afterlife. An ancient Greek story about the afterlife said that everyone who died had to pay Charon, the ferryman of the river Styx, to get to the underworld. They thought that when a person died, an obol, a Greek coin worth 1/6 of a drachma, had to be placed in the mouth or near the body as payment for Charon. People also thought that if you couldn't pay the fare, your soul would have to walk around aimlessly on the banks of the river Styx for 100 years before you could cross it. Ancient Greeks didn't know what heaven or hell were, so this was one way they came up with to make sure that everyone was just as unhappy as everyone else. Working out naked and selling sweat. The ancient Greeks were very concerned with their bodies and spent a lot of time working on them. The guys would take off all of their clothes, put oil all over their bodies, and then work out. In fact, the word gymnasium comes from the Greek word gymnasian, which means school for exercising naked. The ancient Greeks thought gyms were very important, and every important city had to have at least one. Seeing the naked bodies of the guys working out at these places was a normal part of gym life. The bodies were out in the open and showed who the man was. When the men were done working out, they would use a tool called a stridule to scrape off the oil and dead skin. Their scrapings were highly valued items that were sold as elixirs to the public. Poorly endowed Greek male statues. Even though they liked men to have strong bodies and be manly, the ancient Greeks liked their genitalia to be soft and feminine. The Greek figures we see in museums today all have small penises. This is because a big, round, and straight penis was a sign of stupidity and lack of control, while a small, flabby one was a sign of self-control and intelligence. In fact, when players in ancient Greece played fools on stage, they wore big prop penises that were meant to be funny. According to Ingrid Berthon-Moyne, a photographer who specializes in taking close-up photos of Greek statue testicles, ancient Greece was a highly masculinist culture. They favored small and taut genitals as opposed to big sex organs to show male self-control in matters of sexuality. Belief in zombies. Archaeologists in Sicily have found evidence that the zombie craze has been around for more than 2,000 years based on their study. Carrie Solowski-Weaver, an archaeologist, looked at 2 graves in a Greek town in Sicily that she thought were the graves of revenants. Ancient Greeks believed that the dead bodies of some people could come back to life. To keep them in their graves, they had to be ritually killed or kept sealed by pinning them down with big stones or amphora pieces. Weaver also writes, "The writings of ancient authors give us a glimpse into the minds and beliefs of the Greeks, and it is clear that many members of the society thought that the dead could roam the earth. They imagined scenarios in which reanimated corpses rose from their graves, prowled the streets, and stalked unsuspecting victims, often to exact retribution denied to them in life. Normalized pedophilic relationships. Even though we know that pedophilia is wrong and against the law, many ancient Greeks not only took part in pedophilic relationships but also honored them. The event was seen as a rite of passage for the young people who took part in it. The ancient Greeks were the most likely to have a sexual relationship between an adult man and a teenage or adolescent boy. This kind of relationship is called pederasty. Most of the time, it would be the older man who would try to date a young boy, preferably one in his teens. Most of the time, there was a lot more to these relationships than just sex. They were seen as a civic task and a way to help people out. Bizarre festivals. For the ancient Greeks, festivals were times when they did things that were meant to help them connect with the spiritual world. There were a lot of strange and unique cultural rituals, customs, and rites that took place during these festivals. These included athletic events, sacrifices, elaborate musical performances, and big feasts. The Skiraphorion was one of these celebrations. It was held in the last month of the Athenian calendar. During this time, the people of Athens would bring animals to the Acropolis to be sacrificed to Zeus Polius. Research shows that they would never normally offer plow oxen, but this event was important enough for them to be used as sacrifices. After the offering, the person who did it was put on trial, and he put the blame on the ox. The ox was then found guilty and killed. It was brought back to life by stuffing it with straw. The Adonia, the Araphoria, the Didola, the Lycaia, and the Thesmophoria were some of the other ancient Greek celebrations. Infanticide by exposure. Even though the ancient Greeks thought abortion was barbaric and were against it, they did expose babies who were unwanted because of physical flaws or because they were the wrong gender. People did this because they thought that if the gods wanted to save the child, they would find a way to do so. Most of the time, the patriarch of the family would decide. Usually, kids with birth defects and female babies would be left behind. The ancient Greeks thought that girls were a financial burden because if a good husband was found for them, a gift had to be given. Also, daughters rarely had jobs that paid enough for them to add to the family's income. Odd contraceptive practices. Women in ancient Greece often used olive and cedar oils to slow down the movement of their partner's sperm. This gave them more time to wash their genitalia after having sexual relations, which lowered their chances of getting pregnant. Other contraceptive practices that were recommended by Greek gynecologists included sneezing. One such gynecologist wrote that when a man ejaculates into his female partner, she should hold her breath and draw herself away a little, so that the seed may not be hurled too deep into the cavity of the uterus. And getting up immediately and squatting down, she should induce sneezing and carefully wipe the vagina all round. This procedure was believed to be effective in expelling semen from the woman's thing. Tasting bodily fluids to perform diagnoses. Ancient Greek medicine said that the body was made up of different fluids that all tasted different. They thought that doctors had to be able to tell which fluid was which by how it looked and tasted. So, if a sick person went to an ancient Greek doctor, the doctor would not only carefully look at the person's feces, but also taste it in order to make a proper diagnosis. Some doctors even asked for urine samples. The urine of a healthy person was meant to taste like fig juice. If it didn't taste like fig juice, the doctor knew the patient was sick. We hope you liked this video. Subscribe to the channel if you're a history addict, and please let us know about civilization or time period we should talk about. Also watch another video here.